everyone, and welcome to this night's version or this night's edition of Literary Nights with Unsolicited Press. Before we start, I would like to remind you all to hit the like button and the subscribe button so you can get notifications for when our show airs every other Wednesday. And tonight we have four authors who will be sharing their work. They're either published or forthcoming from Unsolicited Press. Tonight, meet Beth Bergmeyer, Benjamin Bagocius,
Yep.
and Richard Krause. And also, just joining us is Laura Lillibridge. So welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here, and thank you out there in YouTube and X and Facebook land for joining us tonight. So we're going to go in alphabetical order as we usually do, and tonight we're going to start with Benjamin.
Hey, everybody, and thank you, Rosalia, for hosting this event. And thank you, everybody who has tuned in on YouTube. I know it's lives are very busy and so much going on. So thank you for joining us. So my book is forthcoming. It comes out July 16th. It's called The Gospel According to B, and it's a book of poetry. It's a queer and mystical autobiography and narrative verse of Jesus of Nazareth's coming of age. So unlike canonical gospels, this one pauses with Jesus's childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood, and infuses familiar biblical scenes with mystical perspectives and queer characters. And the poems also add new moments, from Jesus reading the Epic of Gilgamesh to his kiss with a handsome stranger from Sodom, and the impact of street artists and women mystics on his unconventional ideas about sex, mysticism, and the divine. So I'll just jump right in. I've chosen to read a few of my favorite poems from the book, poems that represent a couple poems represent Jesus's childhood, some his adolescence, and then some his early adulthood. So I'll just jump right in. The first poem is called "One of the Wise Men Explains Why He Became an Astronomer." And this is in the imagined voice of one of the wise men. So an artist showed me his drawing of a star in the shape of two men kissing. Their entwined lips were streaks of light. Their hair blew backward like wild horse tails. Their eyes looked into each other's and into mine. That night I scanned the sky and I saw it. The kiss that had always been there. Two men sitting inside Anu's chariot, their kiss showering the night with sparks as the Lord drove them across the heavens. Thank you. The next poem I'm going to read is I imagined Jesus as a child, and he's sitting with his classmates. So the title of this one is Yeshua, or Jesus. Yeshua sits cross-legged with his classmates and listens to Artemis's parable of the soccer match. So I'm imagining like Artemis telling a parable to Jesus and his classmates. At the soccer match, players kick the ball out of bounds into the stands. The ball floats at you. It is big and soft. There is no way you will not catch it. No one else in the stand moves to clutch it. They relax. That it is meant for you is obvious. Just sit there. Who you are does not rise and clamor for foul balls that fly into the throng. The game is where you sit and watch God's big, rounded softness waft into your lap. Thank you. I'll read a third poem now. And this one, I'm imagining Jesus reading the Epic of Gilgamesh. So the Epic of Gilgamesh is humanity's oldest known written piece of literature. So some people say it can be as old as 7,000 years old. Other people say it's closer to 4,000 years old. But regardless, it's considered humanity's oldest written work of literature. And so, yeah, here it is. I just imagine Jesus reading it. So the title of this one is Yeshua's Friends Wait Outside While He Finishes Reading Gilgamesh. And I'm imagining Jesus thinking as he's reading. So Gilgamesh falls in love like God does with everyone. Questions of preference play no part in loving. Gilgamesh restores plazas and groves for those whom he will never know, criminals and victims alike. He rebuilds Eanna Temple as a resurrection of innocence upon the highest hill. Each time we see another's innocence, we add weight to the grooved stone steps to the temple. All right, thank you. The next poem, I'm imagining Jesus sort of as a late teenager, maybe early 20s, and his first visit alone to Jerusalem. He's traveling there. I'm imagining he's traveling there for some sort of retreat. So the title of this one is Yeshua Gets Help Finding the Temple. And this is spoken in the voice of Jesus. I walked to the temple retreat in Jerusalem, carrying my bag of food and clothes. My first trip to the city alone. The path diverged into two. Atop the hill, I saw the paths connect again beyond gardens and plazas. But on my map, the paths stayed separated. One continued right and the other continued left. Should I trust my eyes or the map? I stepped inside a shop to ask for help. A clerk looked up from his repair table. He was shirtless except for a vest opened across his chest, glistening with sweat from his labor. How can I help you? I told him I was looking for the temple but was confused. Should I trust my eyes or the map? Moonlight escaped from his eyes like stars through woods. A folded map in the sky. The temple's not far, he said. I'll bring you there. Could he just leave his workplace like that? But I sensed his job was to show me the temple. Thank you. All right. Just maybe a few more poems here. Let's see. I'll read one now that imagines an extra character in the miracle where Jesus turns water into wine at a wedding. I'm just sort of imagining an encounter at this wedding that doesn't make it into the biblical account, but it makes it into my gospel. So this one is called Why Jesus Changed Water to Wine. At the wedding, the groom's brother sat beside me on the stone wall, bordering the garden where everyone danced and drank. The music held us apart from them like a soft net. He was drunk and moving his body close to mine. His knee touched mine. He moved the insides of his eyes closer to the insides of my eyes. He said, "The wine is nearly out." One more sip pooled in his glass. His eyes mouthed, "Kiss me." I got up, found the barrels, and turned water to wine, not for the bride and groom, but for the changes wine works in a man to ache so tenderly, so openly for a kiss in a garden. All right, thank you. Alrighty, this next one. So here I'm just imagining Jesus I don't know. I mean, maybe at this point he's becoming famous. He's maybe in his like late 20s, maybe early 30s. He's becoming well known as like a spiritual leader. And this one is called Yeshua Chats with a Person Who is About to Torch and Riot Downtown. We think God knows everything, but he doesn't. He doesn't know how to post on social media or how to drive. God can't figure out handcuffs or how to set a building on fire. If we narrowed our area of expertise to nonsensical peace, absurd love, and everyone is innocent, we'd know as little as God does. Thank you. All right. So I'll read two more short poems and then I'm done. Let me see here. This one I'm imagining Jesus, his grandpa sort of sitting him down. It's called Yeshua's Grandpa Sits Him Down Again. I'm imagining Yeshua's, this is in Yeshua's grandpa's voice. Yeshua, you need to settle down. Buy some property. Marry. You're not young anymore. You've never known what it's like to love. And then my last poem is, this is actually the last poem in the book. It's called Jesus's Parable of the Windy Day. The street artist watched the wind take his drawing. It flapped across the ground and past street vendors. The artist did not yell to passersby to catch it. Nonetheless, a couple of men tried, even climbing up a fire escape to follow it blowing upward past the second floor. That is the self blowing away, Jesus said. People tried to rescue mine by writing the Gospels. Luke and John and B climbed that fire escape. They think I lost something precious. I was the artist who stood there and watched it blow away. Thank you, everybody, for your time and attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to have a lot to talk about after in our Q&A. Mm-hmm. So, Beth, can you tell us about your book and also read a little of your work?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Rosalia, for hosting this, and thank you for everybody who has come to watch and listen to us. I really appreciate it. My work is novel fiction, and it's called A Novel in Stories. This is the first time I've written a novel this way. It's 4 stories about 4 separate characters, and they each experience their own crisis. And although each story is somewhat complete in itself, I want the reader to want a little more at the end of the story, like what's next for that character. And so in the very last story, the 4th, all of these characters' lives merge together and they face one last big hurdle together. So it's an interwoven story. It started out as just one short story that I'd written for our writing group and transformed into something a lot bigger. So it is forthcoming this June. So very excited about that. And I'm just going to start with the very first story in the series. The novel is called All Points of Light Converge. And the first story in the novel is called Freedom Road. It's about a woman in her mid-30s who's pretty much reached her breaking point in her life, dealing with a marriage that's pretty lifeless and a very troubled college-aged daughter. So we will start with her story. Freedom Road, Friday, June 26th, West Des Moines, Iowa. Keita sat in her car and stared at the duffel bag, pillow, and backpack that were splayed across the passenger seat. The silent, inanimate passengers stared back, like they were daring her to go, to take them somewhere, anywhere but here. She glanced at the hotel across the street, a whole 20 miles from her house. 20 miles wasn't enough. 200 might not even be enough. 20 miles is a start, she whispered to the air around her. A famous quote went through her head as she stepped out of the car. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. The first step was the grocery store in front of her, then the hotel where she could sit and think, try to figure out a plan. Right now, she just needed to put one foot in front of the other. It was strange to walk through the grocery store without a list, without thinking about what John would want to eat for the week, what Georgia would want if she came home from college for the weekend. Not that she'd be coming home this weekend, unless John picked her up from jail. It had been Georgia's voice on the phone earlier that afternoon that had pushed Keita to pack her things, to drive 20 miles west on Interstate 80 with no clue as to where she was going. Mom, Georgia's tearful voice had come through the phone while Keita had sat at the kitchen table, drinking a glass of water after her 5-mile run. Keita's pulse quickened while her heart dove into her stomach. What's wrong? She wondered how many more wrongs she could take when it came to her 19-year-old daughter. I'm in jail, she sobbed. Keita stood up. Jail? Jail was a new one. Why are you... What for? Silence answered her. Finally, Georgia replied, her voice holding an edge of irritation. Well, for drunk and disorderly, but it was stupid. I wasn't... Keita had learned to expect bad news from Georgia, or about Georgia. This past year had been a nightmare. Academic probation, parties in the dorms, failing classes, but not this, not jail. You were drunk during the day? What were you thinking? I wasn't that drunk, Mom. Georgia's earlier sobs were replaced by this steely voice Keita knew so well. You need to come and get me, she ordered. Something clicked like a switch inside of Keita. All of the bottled fear, anger, helplessness morphed into nothing. Numb nothingness. An exhausted numbness that made her sit back down, made her realize she couldn't do it anymore. She didn't have any more rescues left inside of her. No, she said in a voice she didn't recognize. A dead voice. What? What do you mean no? Georgia demanded. Mom, you have to come and get me. Keita hung up and set her phone on the table. The numbness accompanied her while she crammed as many clothes as possible into her duffel bag. She grabbed some of her art supplies too, although she didn't know why. They'd been untouched for years, remnants of a life that didn't seem like hers. The numbness still persisted now while she walked through the aisles of the grocery store, while she politely answered the checkout person's questions in the right way. Yes, she'd found everything she was looking for. It was a lie. Yes, she was doing just fine on this beautiful summer day. A bigger lie. It truly was a beautiful summer day, cooler than usual on a late June afternoon in Iowa. A sweet wind met her when she walked through the automatic doors to the parking lot, waking her up, blowing through the cracks of her numb cocoon. The sight of the old school bus haphazardly parked next to her car momentarily distracted her from Georgia and John in her life. She couldn't recall ever seeing a bus like it in Des Moines. The classic yellow and black paint was replaced by a dark green that was covered with graffiti art. Some of the artwork was beautiful, while some was sloppy and childlike. Keita walked around her car and took a closer look at the bus. On the side closest to her car, the words Freedom Road were painted in bold rainbow colors, running the length of the bus. Below that, in different lettering, someone had spray painted, Your Destination Station. She wandered around to the back of the bus, where the words Loving You were painted across the back door in what was probably once bright blue paint that was now faded and chipped. The other side of the bus was covered in a hodgepodge of people's names, cities, states, the names of some mountains and mountain ranges. Mount Shasta caught Keita's eye. She froze, placing her hand on her chest, clutching the invisible breath she just sucked in and held. That breath held a different lifetime, a path that would have taken her far from the Midwest, far from everything ordinary. Tears blurred her vision as she turned to go back to her car. Keita had just come around the back of the bus when she saw the young woman a second too late. They hit each other at full force, sending both of them and their grocery bags sprawling on the ground. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," Keita said, looking at the young woman who had dirty blonde dreadlocks that fell almost to her waist. The young woman's face shifted from startled to amused. Laughter erupted from her throat, a long, free, musical laugh. A young guy with a curly black beard jogged up and knelt beside the woman. "Whoa, everybody okay?" He leaned forward to grab an apple that was rolling away, giving Keita a whiff of body odor. The guy in his clothes looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. The girl giggled, "That was a trip." Keita looked at the two bedraggled people in front of her and the groceries all over the ground. Like everything else in her life, it was chaos. She got to her knees and tried to scoop up her groceries, but tears stung her eyes again. Why did everything have to be so hard? "I'm sorry," Keita said again. I didn't see you." She swiped at her eyes, wondering if her cheeks were as red as they felt. The guy reached out and touched her arm. "Hey, pretty lady, why so sad?" She would have laughed if she wasn't so flustered. Pretty was the last word she'd used to describe herself right now. She was still in her jogging shorts and shirt, her limp black hair pulled back in a ponytail. There was no makeup to cover the bags under her eyes, the bags that made her look 50 instead of 36. "Oh, it's nothing," Keita said. She turned her attention back to the girl. "Are you sure you're okay?" The girl didn't look much older than Georgia, possibly younger. "I'm good," the girl answered back as she picked up some of the groceries and put them back in her worn cloth bag. "No worries." No worries. Keita wished she had no worries. If she had no worries, she wouldn't be leaving. She wouldn't be sitting on her ass in a parking lot next to some psychedelic bus, talking to two kids who looked like they hadn't seen the inside of a shower for a long time. Keita tried to sort through the groceries on the ground. One of her paper bags had ripped, and she had no idea how to get everything into one bag. She should just offer the food to the guy and the girl. They looked like they needed it more than she did. She could go back to the store and get more, but she didn't want to insult them. Maybe if she talked to them, got to know them a little, they might accept the food from her. Keita stood, giving up on the groceries for the moment. I was looking at your bus," Keita said. "It's nice. I like the artwork." "Oh, it's not ours. It's Nate's," the girl said, throwing her head in the direction of the grocery store. "He's still in there. Takes him a real long time to shop. I guess he's what you'd call a deliberate shopper, or is it an intentional shopper?" She looked at the guy for an answer. "Yeah, Nate's a pretty intentional guy," he said, as though he'd just said something profound. "He's a good guy, though. A little too serious, but hey, everybody's got their own load to bear." "Yeah, they do," Keita mumbled. The guy was profound after all. "Nate picked us up outside of Chicago," the guy said. "We were flying a sign, hoping to get to Utah for the gathering. Nate saw us, and here we are." Keita didn't understand half of what he'd just said. "Yeah, here we are," she echoed. She shifted her weight. "Well, since you're traveling, do you want these?" Keita motioned to the groceries, hoping she sounded casual and not condescending. "Really?" the girl asked, her eyes brightening. "You sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure. If my daughter was on the road, I'd want people to help her." The road. Keita had longed for the road once, had planned for a whole summer on the road. The summer that unexpectedly turned into morning sickness and a shotgun wedding. So she took a different road, a different life, not her life. And that's where I'll stop.
Thank you so much. All right, we're gonna go with Richard next, and then after that, Laura.
Okay, my book is, what's the name of it? Unashamed. Its title is Unashamed Observations, and It'll be published in June. These are, and they are a collection of prose poems, 120, 110 prose poems. Okay, this is a small selection of them. The tea ceremony. It just occurred to me that making love is just the opposite of the tea ceremony. Or if they were to be considered the same, the cups would have to be snatched out of the participants' hands and shattered on those large stones found outside the tea room in Japanese gardens. The hot tea would be spattered over the colorful kimonos. The server would have her powdered tea container upset in a small cloud of green dust. The bamboo whisk brush would fall on the tatami and roll in the corner. The hanging scroll over the small alcove would be pulled down in the effort to get hold of the kimono. Everyone else would have fled. Finally, you'd unloosen the obi and undrape the kimono, and after completely undoing the long swirls of the most colorful material, you would have overcome the idea of diametrical opposites and merged the tea ceremony with lovemaking. Okay, this one is called Her Tears. She showed me her tears just at the point when her eyes were brimful. She knew the exact moment to turn on me just before they would run down her cheeks. I stopped this for good one day when we were at the dinner table by saying, "Fine, now bring your face over my plate. You can salt my potatoes." This is called The Cat Below My Window. The cat below my window has a housebroken meow. The black and white cat with the bell around his neck. He thinks he'll get his desire of the female by compromise, by talking things over, so to speak. It's an illusion that comes from living with people too long. Instead of pouncing on her or giving his voice all that shrill freedom of a mock anger, that would give the slighter brown and white cat reason to submit, keeping her dignity. But this pleading that I hear, this milksop meow, no female cat with a shred of dignity would submit to that, not to mention the tinkle of the bell. This is called Dad Tickling Me. It started with Dad tickling me, she said. I had stayed back from school. I don't remember what for, but I was in my nightgown and Dad was partially dressed. We joked and were having such a good time, his holding me, tickling me, letting me go. I scampered free, let out explosions of laughter, and from him too, bursts of air as I wriggled in and out of his grasp. Then all of a sudden, Mom returned and yelled at us, scolded Dad and said, "I never want you to do that again." And he was so embarrassed. Right in front of me, she scolded him, and his face got red, as if he had done something that would never have crossed his mind had Mom not come home and yelled at him like that. Okay, some of these have Japanese themes. I should mention I lived in Japan for 9 years. This is called busu. Busu, she said. Do you know what that means? To get a laugh. That was a catchword Japanese used, but it was a word that pulled out the stops, that determined me. All her beauty fell prey to that word. All that I had been avoiding, all that temporarily swayed me from my ends, all the humiliations I had absorbed, all these things broke open. She was the most beautiful woman I had seen circulating through Tokyo and Yokohama. I can't describe her beauty, the skin that surpassed mere covering. It was like some substance that seemed out of place. And the eyes, the largest of their kind among her people, big and black with lids that curved like two doves' bodies. The beauty made me suspect it was a mask of a face, that only now did the reference to the Japanese for ugly woman, to get a laugh, unmask. Okay, this one is called Rock Candy. One day, 15 years later, you're standing before a class of Japanese students. The women all dressed to the T, some in the latest fashions, buttoned at the neck, arms crossed or folded on their desks, and you think of her. How you both had no money the day you drove to Fisherman's Wharf for a job interview. And when she came back, she said, "He asked me to take my top off." "What?" he said, "to see if I would do it and could model some of their new lines. He said he owned 2 stores in San Francisco. And only your top?" you asked. No, she said. And did you do it? She didn't answer. You're angry now. Did you? Yes, she answered, curtly and embarrassed. Let's get some rock candy, you say, as your class, forgetting for a moment where you are. I mean, Miss Watanabe, if you can't see the print, don't you have glasses? Oh, yes. She puts them on as a hard brilliance catches them with a crystalline light that your memory devours as something almost sweet. Okay, this is called Vermont Winter. I also drove a taxi in New York City for 5 years. Driving through the Vermont winter, white snow all around and the black bark of trees. The contrast goes inside. The black trees, the white snow, the branches reaching out stiff and creaking. I can hear the limbs when I stop. My breath I can see. The life is still there. My nose begins to lose sensation, grow numb. My fingers too. The white snow all around harkens, pulls, drags me back down Interstate 91, down I-95, down to the Cross Bronx Expressway, exiting at Jerome Avenue, back 10 winters ago. As frigid as Vermont that night under the L. It is past midnight, 2 or 3 in the morning. A thick blanket of snow covers everything. The roads are iced. I'm taking my taxi in, having pressed my luck already and not gotten stuck. My garage is only a few blocks ahead. At a red light, there is a knocking on my cab window. An old black couple asks, can I take them over the concourse? No, I can't make it, I say, up the hill. They plead with me. No, I have no snow tires. And left them in the dead of night as immobile as the trees I now see every winter in Vermont, squeaking in the frigid temperatures. Each black bough, each dark trunk brings back their overcoats, dots the landscape with the appearance of reaching out, stiffly frozen, barely able to move, like the couple that walked away ever so slowly from my yellow cab, yellow as the sun, yellow as a wheat field in autumn, yellow as the butter that I melted on the French toast I stuffed myself with at breakfast the next morning. Okay. Well, I guess I should mention this here. I was brought up in an orphanage in Pennsylvania. This is from that. It's called Irving. I remember her saying to him, Irving, if you don't stop talking to yourself, the men in the white coats and butterfly nets are going to come and take you away to 11th and Maclay. Chances are Irving was really talking with himself, but it is also possible that he was muttering some disapproval under his breath. In fact, she was the one who named Irving the pack rat because he hoarded things. First, he carried them in his bulging pockets, then deposited them in secret stashes, which when she uncovered them, calling all 21 of us to the basement, she would display smack in the middle of the dressing room floor, her eyes all wide and her lip curling up to her nose in disapproval of old foodstuffs Irving had saved or unlaundered socks she might find. The mentality was the opposite of finding a buried treasure, for Irving seemed to hide just what seemed most worthless. She, in one smooth motion, spilled it out from the shirts and socks he had them wrapped in, trifles we sometimes had discarded. But when we saw them strewn on the floor, the fruit of her uncovery, they would take on a value they hadn't had before, and we would be prompted to join her in accusing Irving of stealing what we had discarded. Perhaps Irving never knew the difference, for he, through this ritual of uncovering, when his soul was as if emptied of its contents, there on the basement floor, would not utter a word of self-defense. His face would be that glowing pink that contrasted so well with his sparse wisps of blonde hair, a uniform pink that told of his overweight and the readiness of his blood to respond to any embarrassment. It was a sight there, all the hoarding spilled on the floor, with Mrs. Shank yelling in Irving's face, pack rat, and the rest of us repeating the litany in chorus, pack rat, and Irving just standing there stiffly under the bare basement light bulb in the center of the floor, his possessions at his feet, scattered all around the drain cover, his metal rimmed glasses, because of the straightness of his posture, catching the light, blinding us of any chance to look into his eyes for an idea of what he was thinking. Pack rat, we chanted. And I remember her yelling as she rooted through his things for him to empty his pockets. Right here and now, Mr. Provost, trying to erase even the dignity that his last name suggested. Okay, there's just two more. This is called Respect for Books. He has an undue respect for books. He never marks them up or reads while eating for fear of soiling them. He respects and pays allegiance to all he reads. I tear to shreds the pages in his presence, mount the most convincing arguments why this or that book should not be read, why my markings in the margins, my underlining, checks, asterisks, why whole paragraphs I've X'd out are superior to the printed page that he keeps virgin and unthumbed. I tell him, nothing will grow in the forest of books you have, the 3 books you read a week. You've got to take your pen to them, scarify them, tear, shred the pages. Your mind should be like a lumber mill. It should spin with the sharp weight of gears, sprockets with the teeth of thought, meant to sever and section trees. That's how you should handle pages, as if every book you read were walking the plank. Okay, this is the last one. It's called In the Bar. Every detour he makes, every hesitation, even at a stoplight, every suggestion tendered, every movement that you think is disinterested is to fill the keg of his stomach with beer, to drain what sits in every bar, pub, saloon. He's game for them all. And his pool eye, his shuffleboard gaze, the pinball lights that dance and flicker, the sharp tip of every dart, all depend on tapping the keg. Draft, he says, in manly tones that all the customers can hear. And he nurses each drink just long enough to run the table until his bullseye is put out by the last fletched orange and blue dart. He knows how much alcohol it takes to light up the woman's breasts on the pinball machine. What straight shot will make her pink panties glow? The keg his stomach is replaces that sitting behind every bar with a liquor license. And every 2 days he's drawn there to drain their contents through a maze of the most colorful games. The highballs on the green beige table, he sinks one after the other into the pocket with the deftness of alcohol running through the conduits of his circulatory system, flushing out all memories that don't pertain to the game at hand. It is for that he has developed the softest shot in the bar, and why he rarely loses. Okay, thanks for listening.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And Laura, I know you have written a memoir. Can you tell us about the memoir and do your reading?
Yes, so my book just came out 2 weeks ago, I think. It's called The Truth About Unringing Phones. And it's an essay collection about my father, who moved from Rochester, New York to Anchorage, Alaska when I was 4 years old. And this book is my attempt to weigh what I owe a father who abandoned me. And I'm just going to read one essay called I Remember, I Wonder, I Want. I remember my father chasing me around the playground in his red and black checked Woolridge coat. The Anchorage playground was chilly, even in summer. The sparse grass was dry green with brown tips, the ground mostly hard-packed dirt. Yar, it's the tickle monster, Dad yelled, and I squealed in glee. I zigged and he zagged around the monkey bars. His fingers scratched the air in tickle motions, and this made me collapse in giggling anticipation. I always let him catch me, then struggled to get away, as tickling was joy with an edge of pain. I preferred the imaginary tickle fingers to the reality. Sometimes he tickled too hard or for too long. His affection often came with an edge to it. But still, my father on the playground, chasing me and laughing, like there was nowhere else he wanted to be, like I was loved. I remember Dad and I playing chess with his hand-carved Japanese chess set made of jade. I had a habit of knocking over the fragile pieces. The next time someone knocks over a piece, we're putting the game away, Dad warned me. I didn't knock over the next piece, he did. Dad apologized as he quit playing and put the pieces in their fabric-lined case. We had to follow the rules, even though it wasn't my fault this time. I understood he was trying to teach me about fairness and treating things nicely, and that he had backed himself into a corner he couldn't get out of. I ran my fingertip over the queen with her flowing robe, and I didn't want her to break either. We played again the next day. He bought me a travel chess set with magnetic pieces and a case that zipped shut, but I rarely played back home in New York. Chess was only for my father. I remember the roll and sway of Dad's sailboat, the Ghost, my father standing steady in the cockpit. He didn't bother to wipe away the rain running down his face. There's no point, he said, not unhappily. I wonder if each drop kept him in the moment. If he wanted to commit this experience to memory, file away the tactile sensation alongside the harsh cry of the seagulls, the salty tang of the air. Maybe he was resigned to the futility of wiping away rain and accepted it stoically in an effort to role model what kind of person he wanted me to become. Someone unaffected by the elements, someone whose feet stood firmly, even while not on solid ground. I remember the clammy feel of my sweatshirt against my back as I sat under the Dodger at the rear of the sailboat, attempting to stay dry as I kept Dad company in the rain. Somehow, neither the damp nor the chill bothered me that day, not like it would back home in New York. When I did descend the ladder to the boat's interior, everything was warm, glowing wood. The Ghost had oval portholes with brass trimmings, a brass handrail turned green by the briny air, and a shiny brass clock that rang out 4-hour shifts. The galley stove floated like a ball compass or a Weebles Wobbles toy, swaying gently with the rocking of the boat so that the surface stayed level. A small fence went around the burners in case of sudden ocean swells. The sink had 2 water sources, fresh and salt. We washed the dishes with salt water, pumped with a foot pedal, and only used fresh for the final rinse. The refrigerator was inside the counter and accessed by pulling up a hatch with a round brass pull. It smelled like sour milk, and I avoided opening it if I could help it. More food was stored down in the bilge, so the coolness of the deep water kept it fresh. There was always a little seawater washing around. I remember rowing our dinghies, the Mist and the Spirit, to shore. We had built them with our father the year before. Mine, the Spirit, was lavender, and Matt's was seafoam green, which really wasn't the color of seafoam at all. Prince William Sound was a gray-green tone of jade, and the waves bubbled white on the sandless beaches, the shore made of smoothed pebbles. The islands we visited seemed to be the Earth's bedrock itself, risen from the sea. On the shore, we separated and followed the stories in our heads, my brother and I each creating our own adventures, or at least I did. I was Thorin Oakenshield. I was a pirate. I was a treasure hunter. We went to shore even in a drizzle because good weather was not to be relied on, and we had a deadline made of miles and days to get to Cordova, a small fishing village where Dad was a visiting doctor, and where I recorded his patients' heights and weights in their charts and called every patient to make sure they were on time. I remember sobbing as Dad strapped us into the plane seats for our red-eye flight back home to our mother's house. Sometimes we cried for only the first hour. Sometimes my brother and I cried off and on for all of the 11 hours it took to get back home. I remember the phone in my mom's dining room. It was black with a rotary dial. The coiled cord was sprung from being stretched to its limits for privacy as we pulled the receiver around the corner or under the table, out of view of our parents. The ringing phone was the starting bell of our frantic race to answer it. "I got it," my brother and I would yell, pushing each other out of the way to grasp the receiver. It was my friend Dawn or Liz. It was one of Matt's friends. It was someone from my mother. Only a few times a year was our father's voice at the other end, softened by the tinny static of long distance. Maybe my dad meant to call. Maybe he stood in his office, stethoscope tucked between the buttons of his pinstripe dress shirt, and picked up the receiver, one hand extended to press the buttons, and he happened to glance at the clock, and doing the math of the 4-hour time difference, noticed that it was too late. Perhaps he thought, I'll call as soon as I'm done with dictation, but then his pager buzzed, and he rushed down to the ER, everything forgotten except the current emergency. Some kid was always swallowing a quarter, and retrieving them was his specialty. I wonder if he thought of me as he sat in the concert hall and watched my stepsister sing with the school choir or play with the band. I wonder if he missed me when he taught my stepbrother to downshift around the icy roads in Anchorage. I wonder if he ever wondered who taught me to drive. I wonder if he thought about me at all between visits, or if this second chance to be a father, as he called his stepchildren, filled in all the missing spaces inside him, a new jigsaw puzzle piece that was close enough to fit. My second oldest stepsister, after all, was only a week older than I was. My eldest stepsister and I both worked in law offices. The youngest siblings rode bikes, went to proms, and had friends spend the night just like I did. Memories and children were interchangeable. Maybe the new family was exactly what he needed to make him whole. Maybe I was a passing thought, a smile of memory. Perhaps raising me was a job he considered more or less adequately done, something he took pride in, his fading memory blurring the edges of the gaps in the calendar, the 10 months we were apart. Now, when the phone rings and when I see his name on caller ID, I push the button to send it to voicemail. Let's be honest, my father's voice hasn't appeared on my caller ID that often in the last few years. After years of my declining calls, he stopped trying, or maybe he no longer remembers how to dial a phone. I want to matter to my father. I want the phone to ring, and I want to answer it. I want to answer the phone if my father ever calls me again. I'm not sure I will. Thank you.
Thank you all for reading such richly lyrical pieces tonight. So we have a very short Q&A tonight. So let's just start. If everyone can tell me what inspired their work, um, and we could go in a circle, beginning with Ben, and then Richard, and then Laura, and then Beth.
Oh, wow. What a beautiful question. What inspired the work? I think I typically, I love writing academic articles. So I love writing my analyses of literature. But for some reason, sometimes when I'm writing creatively, I get stuck. But I think what was really helpful about something I discovered with another book was that when I am writing in the voice of somebody else creatively, then all this ideas just come up and I feel freer in my writing. So I think in a previous book, I was speaking through I was giving the Canaanite woman a voice. The Canaanite woman is a woman in the Gospels who asked Jesus to help her daughter with complicated behaviors. Um, um, And so this book, I just turned to a different religious figure, Jesus. And I think when I can try to imagine what another person is thinking, then my creative writing can really flow. So I think that was just, it's just fun to imagine I'm somebody, multiple others. So thank you.
That's far different from writing academically, to write creatively. Richard, it seems like you've had parts of all of your lives and all of your poems, your Japanese years and your years as a taxi driver. So how did you come to poetry, and how did you start writing about your experiences?
Well, I would write sometimes when I was driving, and I always have a notebook when I'm moving about and when things occur to me, I copy them down. The tea ceremony was the result of my living in Japan and taking part in some tea ceremonies. The cat below my window was from an experience I had that I worked in the ending, The Tinkle of the Bell. Dad tickling me, it was a good friend I had who actually confided in me this scene with her father and mother. Busu is a Japanese name for an ugly woman that someone who I knew very well, was very attractive, used, and it kind of besmirched her a little bit, the use of it. The rock candy was an experience I had in Fisherman's Wharf that I transferred to my Japanese class I was teaching. Vermont winter was an experience. Well, I lived in Vermont, but also when I was driving a cab in New York, I had the experience of this couple knocking on my door, on my window, car window, and asking me to give them a ride home, and I refused, and that stuck with me and was a result of the yellow as the sun is a wheat field as butter on French toast. Irving was a result of when I lived with 21 boys, and the one boy was bullied by the house parent. Respect for books is a kind of opposite to my great respect for books. I don't throw away any book ever. And then in the bar is just simply the drinking life of a friend of mine. That's it.
Wonderful. So it seems kind of autobiographical. And
Yes, these
Beth,
are autobiographical. Yes.
yeah. And Beth, I'm really interested in how you came to your character and also choosing to write it as a novel in stories.
Yeah, I'll try to give a brief answer. Years ago, I mean, I had first heard about an event called the Rainbow Gathering when I was, I don't know, 20, and had always wanted to go. It's a big, up to 20,000 people all meet every year in a different national forest across the United States and gather in the woods and live in the woods together. They create kitchens, communities. Everyone is fed. No money is exchanged. Everyone is loved. You have people of all classes, all races. It's always the first week of July, and July 4th, there's silence from sunrise to noon, and there's either prayer for peace, meditation for peace. 20,000 people gather in a mountain meadow and hold hands and silence, and it's really a powerful event. And I finally got to go 2013 and 2014. I got to go 2 years in a row, and it was kind of a life-altering experience just to meet so many amazing people. And so I wanted to write about it. And so these 4 characters, some have no idea they're going there. Like my first character has no idea she's going to end up there. I have a second character who wants to get there, but there's an obstacle in her way to get there. The third character wants nothing to do with that lifestyle, but someone from her past kind of brings up an old side of herself. And the last story is about 18. He's almost 18. His parents just found out he was gay. They want to send him to a conversion camp. He lives in the town next to where the Rainbow Gathering is being held that year. And so he runs away to the gathering. And that is where all 4 of these characters' lives converge. And they really all come together for this last character and for his story. And they all kind of complete each other's stories. So just because it's such an unusual type of event that not a lot of people know about, and I really wanted to write about it and how life altering it can be. And these characters just started to come. Whenever I write fiction, the characters come to me first and they start to tell me their story. And so all four of these characters are very different, and absolutely loved writing all of their stories. And they always surprise me on where they're going to take me. So,
Well, I certainly enjoyed listening to Akita's story because she gets the call that mothers kind of dread.
yeah.
And I think every parent can sort of relate to that.
Uh-huh.
There's no more F's to give, as my daughter would say it. And from the other side of the coin, Laura, you're from the other side of the coin, writing about your dad from a child's perspective. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, how I process things in my life has always been by writing. Um, so, when my father started experiencing dementia, I knew that I was going to write my next book about him. And so, this book goes between, my childhood memories and then memories, more current memories of my father as he struggles with dementia and as he loses sort of himself, as he sort of fades away. And in this essay that I read, I did what we call perhapsing, where I tried to like picture what he was thinking as a way to try and give him a bit of redemption. Because the child's view is always much harsher than what we know as an adult about how hard life can be. So anyway, thanks so much for putting this together. I really loved hearing everyone else read as well.
Yeah, I'm very thrilled with everyone's work, and I can't wait to read the book. I want to remind all of our viewers and listeners that all of these books are available on Unsolicited Press's website, and I'm going to put it in the and you can go to either books or pre-ordered and order these books. I know that I cannot wait to read some of these books, and these are all very richly drawn. My eyes are not really that great, so I'm not sure. I think I misspelled it, so I'll add it after the show. But anyway, I so much enjoyed everyone's works. I can't wait to read them. Um, it's been really wonderful. I want to thank all of our viewers for watching. I want to remind everyone that our next streamed readings are April 3rd, 5:30 p.m. Pacific time and 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. I hope you'll come back and join us, everyone. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And also go to unsolicitedpress.com and order the books from the authors whose works we enjoyed so much this evening. Bye, everyone.